This weekly religious public affairs program is brought to you by Austin Metropolitan Ministries. The inscription is dated 1840, and in it, Reverend Tolliver has written, "I was baptized November 28, 1840. Preached my first sermon July 1845. You see a picture of Reverend Tolliver, and with that below a photograph of Austin, probably taken around the mid-1800s, that shows the old state capitol way off on the distant skyline. The pastor and this energetic congregation soon built their first church building. In this photograph, the original capitol is in the upper corner, and the rectangular building on the left is the First Baptist Church building in Austin. Notice the bell tower on the church because the bell played an important role. Now this is a picture of the bell installed in that first church building, which served as the alarm system for the whole community. They called it the Baptist bell, and it was rung when there was an emergency or a fire or the community needed to gather. This bell has served in every subsequent building the First Baptist Church had, and today still rings on Sunday mornings in the steeple of First Baptist Church. In 1880, the original rectangular church you saw in the earlier photograph was remodeled, and they built gables and a prominent bell tower and steeple. Later, the congregation relocated and built their second structure at 10th and Colorado Streets. This building served until relocation in the mid-70s to their present facilities at 9th and Trinity Street. We're grateful to the Reverend Don Searles and First Baptist Church for the use of these photographs and this valuable old Bible that have given us a glimpse of Austin over a century ago. Since Reverend Tolliver formed that first congregation, Austin has grown tremendously, and so have the number of Baptist congregations. So let's meet our guests who are part of this fine Baptist tradition and will help carry it into the next century. I'd like to introduce to you the Reverend Jim Hatley, who is a distinguished retired executive director of the Austin Baptist Association, just very recently retired. Thank you for coming. And his successor, the Reverend Dale Gore, who is now the director of the Austin Baptist Association, and on his left is Mr. Jim Sapp, a lay member at Highland Park Baptist Church, but has served the denomination faithfully in a number of ways, and we're going to hear about some of those. I'm so sorry that one of our guests could not be here tonight. Ms. Nadine Francis of Buckner Baptist Benevolences had planned to be with us and was taken ill, and I'm so sorry. She's really been sick, but we'll miss her. So we saw a little bit from those old photographs about the start of Baptist congregations in Austin, but let's go back just a little further. Jim, you're kind of the as recently retired at the end of '88. Tell us a little. I would suppose that out of the Reformation the Baptists got started, and so there's roots in Europe, but how did they get planted over here and in Central Texas?
Thank you, Barbara, for asking us to be on your program this evening, and you're absolutely right. Baptists did come out of the Reformation and from Europe to this country. The majority of Baptists, I'm sure, came from England. In the early 1600s, they began to come from England to our shores and settled in the New England area. There were not only the Baptists, but the Anglicans, of course, and Congregationalists and Presbyterians. These four religious bodies began to help settle our country in its earliest days, but particularly in the 1600s. And up until about 1640, Baptists in this country had their most rapid growth. By 1638, 1640, there were 300 Baptist churches with 40,000 members that were in our country at that time. So yeah, we came as part of the settlers from Europe, mostly from England.
Very, very old. And I guess as a family, there's a number of branches on the Baptist family tree. Jim, Sap, you've kind of looked at history. I know that you've written a history of the Austin Baptist Association. And is there a simple way to tell how Southern Baptists came into being?
Southern Baptists were part of the original Triennial Convention, which included all the different kinds of Baptists in the United States at one time. And back in 1845, they broke off from this convention and established the Southern Baptist Convention in Augusta, Georgia. The immediate issue was slavery, as it was for a lot of different denominations. But the difference in their method of operating and the difference in their way of wanting to set up agencies created a lot of dissension among the different kinds of Baptists. And so this was one of their basic differences. The old society system and the board system with the central headquarters.
Well, did the term Southern Baptist, you said that it related to the strife the whole nation faced relating to the Civil War, but did that mean geographic? Were the largest majority of them in the South?
They were in the Southland, yes.
Now, we've heard a little about the oldest roots and then about how Southern Baptist. Dale, you're new to Austin and you are new to this position, and we're going to welcome you with probably the hardest question of all. If you were talking with someone that perhaps didn't know much about organized religion, how would you describe to them some of the distinguishing characteristics of Southern Baptist?
All right, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, my first day on this new job with you on this program. I think if I were trying to describe to someone who didn't know what Southern Baptists were or what they represented, the first thing I would say is that we are vigorous advocates of the separation of church and state. Baptists have been in the vanguard of this for many, many years. It's ironic that the people who came from Europe seeking religious freedom to this country and created the colonies soon became in fact oppressors of those who wanted the same thing. And Roger Williams and Baptists of those early days rebelled against that oppression, and from that came the strong feeling for religious liberty. And in fact, if you check the history of our Bill of Rights, you'll find a strong Baptist influence in the writing of those bills of rights, especially as it relates to freedom of religion and so forth. So religious liberty, a separation of the church and the state, very, very important to Baptists. I think another way in which I would describe we Baptists would be that we exercise unity amidst diversity. You will find a full spectrum in our denomination of we just have many ways of doing what we do. We have many interpretations. There are doctrinal differences to some extent, and yet we find ourselves strongest when we cooperate in missions. And so we are a voluntarily cooperating group of independent churches. I emphasize independent and autonomous churches who are not responsible to nor must answer to any hierarchy as such. So I would say separation of church and state, unity and diversity, autonomous churches, independent, an emphasis on the priesthood of the believer, of the individual. These are very important to us.
Well, I agree completely that those characteristics do come to my mind in the Baptist that I have known. And there's many places, like you say, the vanguard, the church-state separation issue, where many of other denominations have to thank you all for carrying the banner on that. I think some way that I would characterize it is it has been a rapidly growing denomination. Am I correct, Jim, in saying that it is the largest Protestant denomination and there's some very large congregations?
Yes. There are, in recent years, some very large congregations. For instance, First Church in Dallas has in excess of 25,000 members now.
25,000.
And if you include the non-resident members as well as the resident members, here in Austin, the Hyde Park Baptist Church has in excess of 10,000 members. But this rapid growth and large size church has taken place in more recent years. One of the things that the church decides is whether or not it's going to sponsor the development of new churches or whether it's going to grow itself into a very large church. And this is one of the functions of the association in bringing Baptists together to help new churches get started and providing opportunities in places in subdivisions that are on the drawing boards, for instance, where they need to get in and buy some land and hold it and make ready for a new church in time to come.
What is the size of the denomination? 10 million, 12?
It's between 13 and 14 now.
Oh, I underestimated. It's faster growing than I thought.
Yes.
Oh, when you said that about independent congregations, Jim, as someone, how long did you serve as the executive for the Baptist Association here in Austin?
Just slightly under 8 years. And during that time, Barbara, if I might say, during that time we had a net growth of 26 new congregations since 1980 here in our city.
In the city of Austin. Yeah. Is the association generally the Austin area?
Yes, it is Travis County and a small corner or portion of Hayes County and of Bastrop counties. But primarily we are Travis County.
And what was the number? 26 congregations have been started?
A net gain of 26
in
new
the
congregations since 1980. Yeah.
Well, before we leave this organizational and structure, I wanted to go back to something that you had said, Dale, about independent congregations. What does, clarify that just a little bit. Does that mean each Southern Baptist congregation has total say over who it chooses for its pastor, the use of its finances, its buildings?
Oh, indeed, yes. Yes, there are no authority higher than the local church. Several years ago, a good friend of mine called the Baptist General Convention office in Dallas. And the young lady who answered the telephone said, "Baptist headquarters." And he said, "Young lady, I want to correct you. I am presently sitting in the headquarters of the Baptist General Convention of Texas," which, to put it frankly, is the local church.
That was a pastor.
That's right. So there is no authority higher than the local church. And the local church chooses its committees. Those committees answer to the congregation. It is a locally elected committee that seeks a pastor when a pastor is needed. The finances are determined by that local church, generally in a stated conference time when they vote on the issues. It's very, very local, very independent. And therefore, a local church can determine who serves them, what programs they promote and sponsor, what ministries are theirs, and basically there is no organization, including the association, that can exert authority over that church.
Well, then, related to that, Jim Hatley, let me ask you, does ordination of clergy take place in the context of the congregation? Does this church speak in that way?
Yes, it does. Again, in this matter of cooperation, as Jim Sapp mentioned a moment ago, they involve the volunteer cooperation of other congregations in the ordination of their ministers, all of them, not just the senior pastor, but all of them. But it is a local thing, what the local congregation decides to do. One of the things, Barbara, is that there is no such thing as the Baptist church. There's a Baptist church, and it's that congregation that meets on that particular street that is that. And so they're the ones who have the final say about who the pastor is, how they get him, and how he's ordained.
Well, now, you're saying how he's ordained. That would have been my next question. How do you regard the ordination of women? Yeah.
Barbara, why'd you ask me that question?
I know a couple of women clergy, Southern Baptist, and several here in Austin. Chaplain Barbara Holloway serves at Seton Hospital.
She does, and does a fine job.
And I believe there's one on staff in one of the local churches. And that's not denomination-wide. A congregation may make that choice?
That's correct. A congregation can do that. And there are many women who have been ordained, and more each year. But there are some congregations within the Southern Baptist Convention, the total context of our denominations, that have problems with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're not alone.
Far more that have problems with it than do not have problems.
Well, is it unusual then, for instance, I know too here in Austin, a city this size, is that unusual? You wouldn't find that, say, in other parts of the country?
Yes, you'd find a very low number in other parts of the country, same as here.
There was one at Highland Park in the recent past, was there not?
Right.
Yeah. So, well, a while ago you were talking about the role of the Austin Baptist Association, and you mentioned voluntary cooperation. Dale, as the new director in that position, help us put together, you've talked about the independence of congregations, but what is the Austin Baptist Association and its role?
The Austin Baptist Association is a fellowship of churches who have determined to work together, seeing that there is a task far bigger than any one of them alone can accomplish. And so we come together to support each other. The association is older than the convention. Long before there was the triennial convention, there were associations. The churches were scattered, far distance apart, and for comfort and for support and encouragement, churches would come together annually to meet. And out of those associational, grassroots kind of thing, we have our denomination today. But basically, the association remains for that essential purpose, a fellowship, encouragement, support, and strength. And I like to say that the association is very basically churches helping churches, and with ministries and programs that strengthen them individually and collectively.
Well, the fellowship aspect of it, is there something like a monthly meeting or quarterly?
Oh, yes.
Do pastors get together?
Yes, the pastors have weekly fellowship in the association office, luncheon. Then there is the executive board, which meets monthly, and it is composed of representatives from each of the supporting cooperating churches. I think 3 from each of the churches, which means there would be a board of about 300 members, because there's something around 100 churches and missions in the association.
And the office is over near the Interregional at 38th and a half Street, and I'm sure you would welcome anybody that wanted to come visit and drop in, see the quarters.
Yes.
Well, let's move from talking about how you operate and cooperate and work together to talk about the efforts that you all put out in mission and witness and service. And I want to go back to one thing that you mentioned at Premier, Dale, when you said the separation of church and state and Baptist concern about public policy. Jim Sapp, if I understand, there was a time that you were on a staff of an office in Washington that dealt with public policy. And what are some of the kinds of things a national office like that would address?
Most of the mainline denominations, if not all, have such an office in Washington. Ours is called the Baptist Joint Committee on Public Affairs. This is constituted of various standing committees of each of the denominations who determine how they're going to appoint those committees and who are going to be on them. Usually they're the leading executives and the leading mission personalities in the denomination. And the agenda was purposely kept very small in order that there be cooperation. And it was based on the issue of religious liberty and the separation of church and state. These were the kinds of issues that the office deals with.
Would that be true for today?
Yes, this is true for today. Now, most denominations have other offices which deal with other Christian social ministries. But this agenda was very small, is very small, in order that they can deal with religious liberty issues and with the legislation that's coming in the hopper or is already being debated on the floor of the Congress, or decisions that the Supreme Court has made that will affect the churches in some manner. And they give advice to the state leaders and to the churches who request it.
So it's a real communication point also.
Right. It is also a regional office of Baptist Press, which has several regional offices over the country and has its headquarters in Nashville, where the denomination's headquarters is.
Well, speaking of Washington and Nashville, let's come a little closer to home. As I said, Mrs. Nadine Francis had planned to be with us, was going to talk about some of the outreach and particularly Buckner Baptist Ministry. So Jim, let's turn to you in her absence. I know we've all heard of the children's home in Round Rock, the Buckner Boys Ranch, and do I understand that the Buckner Ministries have undertaken a retirement center? There's homes here in Austin?
There are 2 homes here in Austin, and one of them presently is enlarging its facilities in order to accommodate more senior citizens. And just last week I learned that not only is it being enlarged to accommodate more senior citizens in their retirement years, but that it is also including some facilities for orphans, children.
So the two will be together at the
together.
same facility?
On the same grounds,
Yes.
sharing the same campus. That's correct.
Oh, and what is the Buckner Boys Ranch? You tell us just a word or two about that. That's not here in Austin.
No, Buckner Boys Ranch is near our city, and is, I don't know how old it is. I'm gonna have to refer to Jim to help me. But it's an old institution. It's been there for a long time, and ministers to troubled youth as well as orphan boys, and it is mainly for boys.
And do local churches, if they wish, support these institutions?
Yes, they can, but it is primarily supported through what we call our cooperative program. And the
So that
gifts,
everybody puts a share in.
that's correct.
There are from time to time drives for food and special things, clothing, and
Right.
individuals in the churches may adopt a child in these homes and have them in their homes for vacation and gifts at Christmas and birthdays and that sort of thing.
Well, let me move quickly to another area. Just a word, Jim Sapp. I have to distinguish between Jim Hatley and Jim Sapp. You've also served as the Christian education staff person on a local church.
Right.
And quickly, what are 2 or 3 things that you would attribute the vitality of the Sunday school program in the Southern Baptist? I think it is one of the strongest there is.
Well, the Baptist churches believe that Bible study is a very real essential for church growth and for individual growth. In fact, the first thing the Baptist church usually does is attempt to set up a Sunday school. And usually a strong church comes out of a strong Sunday school rather than the other way around. And they've also believed in a graded Sunday school, which is a Bible study for all age groups in the life of the church. This was a phenomenon that became very hard, very difficult. It was not a generally accepted idea that went well with the pastors even when it first started. But now most pastors are very strong boosters of Bible study in their churches for all ages.
Our time has gone very rapidly, and I have so many questions that I could ask you. I'll try to work in a couple very quickly. Jim, how many churches does cooperate in the Austin Baptist Association?
We have 98 congregations that are cooperating at the present time, and that encompasses 11 different language and cultural groups.
That was the point I wanted to make. Is there not a Chinese and a Korean Baptist church?
This is true. Vietnamese, Brazilian, Haitian, Cambodian, Thai, as well as Spanish, Black, and White Anglo.
Well, there's That's just fascinating. How many members are in the related to the association through those congregations?
Well, Jim was talking a moment ago about resident and non-resident members. The resident membership of the Austin Baptist Association in those 98 congregations is about 60 to 65,000 people. That means those are people that we know where they are. We've got a lot we don't know.
We need to close. Thank you so much for being with us. It's been very enjoyable, and hope you all have a happy new year. We need to conclude, and we're so grateful to these guests who've given us insights about the work and the witness of the Southern Baptist tradition. In the opening sequence on this show, you see religious institutions all over Austin, the synagogues, seminaries, chapels, churches. It's a very different scene from these photos when Congress Avenue was a dirt road, even though a new capitol had been constructed. Austin Faith Dialogue is pleased to be a part of the growth and vitality of the religious community in Austin. Join us next week for a program about religious mission efforts that reach from Austin to around the world. Good day.